The unexpected signal. Captain Jack leaned back in his pilot's chair, staring at the massive abandoned space station ahead. It floated in the dark, its metal surface covered in scars from past battles. The place was dead. No lights, no signals. Just another forgotten relic in deep space. Jack wasn't here for sightseeing. He was a scavenger. He and his small crew made a living by exploring old wrecks, finding valuable tech, and selling it for a profit. This station, named Vetra 9, had been abandoned for years. Rumors said it once belonged to a powerful alien race. If that was true, there could be rare technology inside, maybe even something worth a fortune. Jack flipped on his communicator. "All right, team. We dock in 5 minutes. Be ready." His first mate, a tough woman named Reese, answered. "Got it, Cap. But I don't like this. This place feels wrong." Jack smirked. "Come on, Reese. Where's your sense of adventure?" Reese sighed. "Adventure doesn't pay the bills. Not if we're dead." Jack ignored her warning and brought the ship in. The docking clamps hissed as they connected. The airlock opened with a metallic groan, revealing the dark, empty corridors of Vetra 9. Jack stepped inside, his boots echoing. The air smelled stale. Dust floated in the dim light of his helmet. He turned on his scanner, searching for anything valuable. Then something strange happened. A weak distress signal flickered on his screen. Jack frowned. That wasn't possible. This station was dead. No life, no energy. Yet the signal was clear, a call for help. "Reese, are you seeing this?" he asked. A pause. Then Reese's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Yeah, that's a distress signal. Someone's alive in there." Jack tightened his grip on his blaster. Only one way to find out. He followed the signal deeper into the station. The corridors were long and silent, lined with broken screens and flickering lights. Shadows stretched across the floor, making it feel like something was watching him. Jack shook off the feeling and kept moving. The signal grew stronger, leading him to a heavy metal door at the end of the hall. He pressed a button on the panel, but the door didn't budge. "Locked," he muttered. He pulled out his laser cutter and began slicing through. Sparks flew as the metal melted away. The door groaned, then slid open with a loud screech. Jack stepped inside. His heart stopped. 2 small alien figures sat huddled in the corner. They looked thin, weak, starving. Their skin was pale blue, their eyes large and dark. They wore torn, dirty clothes, and their arms wrapped around each other, as if they were trying to stay warm. Jack lowered his blaster. What the hell? The taller of the two, a girl, no older than 12 in human years, stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. The younger one, barely 6, clung to her sister's arm. Jack took a slow step forward. "Hey, I'm not here to hurt you." The older girl flinched but didn't move. Jack scanned them with his wrist device. The readings shocked him. These two weren't ordinary aliens. Their biology was unknown. Something rare, maybe even extinct. Reese's voice crackled in his ear. "Jack, what's happening?" Jack swallowed hard. "I found 2 survivors. Kids." A pause. Then Reese whispered, "What? How?" "I don't know, but they're starving. We need to get them out of here." Jack reached into his bag and pulled out a small nutrition bar. He unwrapped it and held it out. The younger girl sniffed the air. Then, before the older one could stop her, she snatched the bar and devoured it in seconds. Jack smiled. "See, no tricks." The older girl hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached for another bar. She ate carefully, still watching him like a cornered animal. Jack sighed. "We need to go. This station isn't safe." Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the walls. The floor trembled. The lights flickered. Dust rained from the ceiling. Reese's panicked voice filled his earpiece. "Jack, the station's collapsing. You need to move now." Jack grabbed the older girl's arm. "Come on. She pulled back. No, they'll find us. Jack frowned. Who? Before she could answer, another explosion ripped through the station. The walls cracked. A metal beam crashed behind them, blocking the door. Jack cursed. Damn it. Hold on. He scooped up the younger girl in one arm and grabbed the older one's hand with the other. She didn't resist this time. The station was falling apart. Smoke filled the air. Sparks rained down from the broken ceiling. Jack ran, dodging debris as the corridor collapsed behind him. Reese, get the ship ready, he yelled. I'm already warming up the engines. You have 60 seconds. Jack pushed forward, his lungs burning. The airlock was just ahead. He could see the glow of his ship's lights. 50 feet, 30 feet, 10. A massive explosion blasted from behind. The force threw them forward. Jack shielded the girls as metal shards rained down. Alarms blared. The ship's ramp lowered. Jack jumped onto the ramp, pulling the sisters with him. The door slammed shut behind them. Go, 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 he shouted. The ship's engines roared to life. Vetra 9 erupted behind them, sending fiery debris into space. The explosion's shockwave shook the ship as they barely escaped. Jack collapsed onto the floor, breathing hard. The girls clung to him, shaking. Reese ran in. What the hell just happened? Jack looked at the sisters. They stared back at him, their dark eyes filled with fear and secrets. I don't know, he admitted, but something tells me this is just the beginning. A desperate escape. Smoke filled the air as alarms blared inside the Starhawk. The ship trembled from the shockwave of the explosion that had just consumed Vetra 9. Jack pushed himself up from the cold metal floor, his ears ringing. His heart pounded as his vision adjusted to the dim emergency lights flickering around him. The two alien sisters clung to each other, their large dark eyes wide with terror. The younger one, still trembling, buried her face in her sister's chest. The older one, the one Jack had dragged from the collapsing station, stared at him with suspicion and fear. Jack took a deep breath. You're safe now, he said, his voice calmer than he felt. That station is gone, but you're alive. The older girl didn't reply. Instead, she curled protectively around her sister, her body tense, ready to run if needed. A voice crackled through his earpiece. Jack, what the hell is going on? It was Reese, his second in command. She sounded both angry and worried. Jack tapped his earpiece. We barely made it out. That station was falling apart the moment we got in. I saw the explosion, Reese said. What's the status? Jack glanced at the two girls. We have passengers, 2 alien kids. They were trapped in there. A pause. Then Reese cursed. Passengers? Are you kidding me? You brought unknown aliens on board. Jack sighed. I wasn't gonna leave them to die. Reese. Fine. But we have bigger problems. Our scanners picked up movement before the explosion. Someone else was out there. Jack frowned. Who? A sharp beep interrupted their conversation. The ship's proximity alarm flashed red. Incoming ship detected, the onboard AI announced. Jack's blood ran cold. Damn it. Someone must have seen us escape. He reached the cockpit in seconds, his hands flying over the controls. The Starhawk's radar showed a massive warship approaching fast. It was sleek, black, and armed to the teeth. The hull was marked with a sigil that Jack didn't recognize, but something about it made his stomach churn. Reese, we got company, Jack said. I'm already on the shields, she replied. Who the hell are they? Jack turned to the older girl. Do you know who that is? She hesitated. Then, in a small, shaky voice, she whispered, They found us. Jack barely had time to react before the warship fired. A bright, deadly energy blast shot toward them. Jack slammed his hands on the controls. Hold on. The Starhawk jerked violently as Jack rolled the ship, dodging the blast at the last second. The energy beams sliced through space, just barely missing them. Jack gritted his teeth. That was a warning shot. Reese's voice came through. They're hailing us. Jack's jaw tightened. Put them through. The cockpit screen flickered, and an image of a tall, armored figure appeared. His face was hidden behind a dark metallic helmet, glowing red eyes staring back at Jack. His voice was deep and emotionless. You have something that belongs to us. Surrender the fugitives, or be destroyed. Jack glanced at the sisters. The older girl's hands clenched into fists, her whole body shaking. He turned back to the screen. Sorry, but I don't do human trafficking. The figure didn't react. You do not understand what you are dealing with, human. Hand them over, and I will spare your ship. Jack scoffed. Yeah, I've heard that before. The warship's weapons powered up, glowing with deadly energy. Jack's instincts screamed at him. He had to move. Now. Reese, fire the engines to max. He barked. On it. The Starhawk's thrusters ignited, and the ship shot forward at full speed. The warship fired again, but Jack swerved, the blast narrowly missing them. They're locking onto us. Reese yelled. Jack cursed. He needed a plan. They were outgunned, outmatched, and the enemy had tracking capabilities. Then he remembered. The asteroid belt nearby. Jack grinned. Reese, set a course for the asteroids. We're gonna lose them in there. Are you crazy? Reese shouted. Probably. Jack yanked the controls, sending the Starhawk into a steep dive. The warship followed, firing relentlessly. Explosions erupted around them as the ship weaved through space, dodging the deadly beams. The asteroid belt came into view, a chaotic field of giant, spinning rocks drifting through space. Some were small, others were the size of mountains. It was the perfect cover, or a death trap. Jack pushed the engines harder, diving straight into the storm of debris. The warship hesitated. It was too big to follow easily. They're slowing down, Reese shouted. Jack smirked. That's what I was hoping for. He swerved the Starhawk between two massive asteroids, just as the warship launched a tracking device at them. The small metal disc latched onto the ship's hull with a mechanical click. Jack's eyes widened. Damn it, they tagged us. Reese cursed. They can track us anywhere now. Jack's mind raced. Can we remove it? I need time to find it. Jack gritted his teeth. We don't have time. The warship launched smaller hunter drones into the asteroid belt. The drones were fast, dodging through the rocks with ease. They're sending in the hounds, Jack muttered. The older girl suddenly grabbed his arm. I can help. Jack blinked. What? She took a deep breath. I can disable the tracker. But I need to touch your ship's core. Jack stared at her. What do you mean? Her dark eyes glowed for just a second. I can talk to machines. Jack hesitated. Could she really do it? A drone fired, hitting the Starhawk's rear shields. Sparks flew. Jack made his decision. Fine. Reese, take her to the engine room. Reese hesitated, then grabbed the girl's hand and ran. Jack gripped the controls. I hope you know what you're doing, kid. The warship loomed outside the asteroid field, waiting. It knew they wouldn't escape forever. Jack didn't know what the girl was planning. But if she was telling the truth, it was their only chance. The sisters' secret. The Starhawk shuddered as another energy blast scraped its rear shields. Sparks flew from the control panel, and warning lights flashed across the cockpit. Jack gritted his teeth and pulled the ship into a sharp roll, dodging another drone's attack. Reese, where the hell are you? He shouted into his comm. Reese's voice came through, breathless. Almost there. The kid is doing something. Jack swore under his breath. Something. That wasn't the kind of answer he liked to hear in a life-or-death situation. The warship still loomed just outside the asteroid field, watching, waiting. The drones weren't letting up, weaving between the massive rocks with deadly precision. Jack pulled the ship into a tight spin, slipping between two tumbling asteroids just as a drone fired again. The energy beam missed, blasting a chunk of rock into 1,000 pieces. "This is not going to hold much longer," he growled. Then the ship hummed. Not the usual hum of the engines or the shields. This was different. It was a deep, vibrating pulse, like the ship itself was waking up. Jack felt it under his fingertips on the control panel. What the? A sudden burst of energy surged through the ship, making his hair stand on end. Every screen flickered, then stabilized. The warning lights disappeared. The damage reports vanished. The ship felt alive. Then the drones dropped from the radar. Jack's eyes widened. "Reese, what's happening?" Reese's voice came through, filled with shock. "She did something to the ship." Jack pulled the controls, testing them. The Starhawk responded instantly, faster, smoother, almost like it could read his thoughts. He had never felt anything like this before. Jack slammed the thrusters forward, darting through the asteroid field. The drones didn't chase. They hung motionless, their engines dead. Whatever she did, it worked, Jack muttered. Then, another voice came through his earpiece. "I disabled their link," the girl said softly. Jack blinked. "What?" The older sister's voice was calm but firm. "Those machines, they don't think for themselves. They follow commands through a network. I disconnected them." Jack's mind raced. "You're saying you hacked their system, without touching them?" A long pause. Then, quietly, she said, "I didn't hack them. I told them to stop." Jack's stomach tightened. That was not how technology worked. He turned the ship sharply and shot out of the asteroid field, leaving the dead drones floating behind. The warship still hovered in the distance, but something was different now. "They're not following us," Reese said. Jack frowned. The enemy captain had been relentless before. Why stop now? The cold feeling crept down his spine. "They don't need to," he muttered. "They already know where we are." The warship's demand. The Starhawk's comm system crackled to life. That deep, metallic voice returned. "You have made a mistake, human." Jack clenched his jaw. "Oh yeah. Looks like we're still in one piece." The voice remained emotionless. "You misunderstand. The fugitives do not belong to you. They belong to us." Jack's fingers tightened on the controls. "They're not fugitives. They're kids. They are property." Jack's blood boiled. "You sick son of a..." "You do not understand what they are," the voice continued, ignoring him. "Those creatures are not children. They are weapons. They are ours. Surrender them, or we will take them by force." Jack turned to look at the older sister. She was sitting near the ship's core, staring at him with silent intensity. The younger one clung to her, eyes wide and frightened. Jack took a breath. "Is it true?" The older girl hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "Yes." Jack's stomach sank. But before he could say anything, the warship launched something new. Not a blast. Not drones. A boarding pod. Jack's eyes widened. "They're coming in." The boarding party. The pod slammed against the Starhawk with a sickening clank. Jack heard the metal groan as it latched onto the hull. Then came the screech of something cutting through the airlock. Reese cursed. "They're cutting their way in." Jack grabbed his blaster. "We have intruders." The older girl stood. "We have to run." Jack shook his head. "Not an option. If we don't stop them here, they'll take this whole ship." The airlock hissed. Jack took cover behind a crate, blaster aimed. Reese crouched beside him, weapon ready. The door burst open, and figures in sleek black armor stormed in. Their weapons glowed with cold blue energy. Elite cybernetic hunters. "Move," Jack shouted, firing first. His blaster bolt struck one in the chest, but it barely staggered. "Damn it," Reese muttered. "They have shields." The enemy returned fire. Jack and Reese barely dodged as blue energy bolts sizzled past them, burning holes in the ship's walls. Then, Jack saw something in his peripheral vision. The older girl was standing in the open. "Get down," Jack shouted, but she didn't move. Instead, she raised her hand. The air shimmered. The cybernetic hunters froze mid-step, their bodies twitching, their weapons short-circuiting. Sparks popped from their suits as they struggled against some invisible force. Then, one by one, they collapsed. Jack stared. Reese lowered her blaster. What the hell just happened? The girl lowered her hand, breathing heavily. "I stopped them." Jack exhaled slowly. "How?" The girl hesitated, then said, "Because they were made to obey. And I told them to stop." Jack's heart pounded. The cybernetic hunters, powerful, relentless killing machines, had been defeated without a fight. Not hacked. Not destroyed. Just ordered to stop. Jack looked at the girl again. For the first time, he wasn't just seeing a scared kid. He was seeing something more. Something dangerous. A deadly pursuit. Jack stood frozen, his blaster still raised, as the last of the cybernetic hunters collapsed. Their glowing eyes flickered and dimmed, their bodies twitching slightly before going completely still. He turned to the older girl, Lura. She was breathing hard, her small hands clenched into fists. A faint glow still flickered around her fingertips, something unnatural, something impossible. Jack's mind raced. What the hell just happened? Reese broke the silence first. "Jack, tell me I'm not seeing things." Jack swallowed hard. "I'd love to, but I have no damn clue what we just saw." The younger sister, Vexa, whimpered and grabbed Lura's arm. "They're going to come again," she whispered. Lura nodded grimly. "We need to go. Now." Jack's instincts screamed at him. Every part of him told him to ask questions, to figure out what these girls were. But the warship was still out there, and it wasn't waiting. "Reese," Jack said, snapping back into action. "Get these bodies off my ship. We don't need their trackers on board." Reese hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, but I expect some damn answers later." She and one of the crew members started dragging the metal-plated bodies toward the airlock. Jack turned back to Lura. "All right, kid. You have 2 minutes to tell me what the hell you just did." Lura hesitated, glancing at Vexa. Then she finally spoke. "I told them to stop." Jack exhaled sharply. "I got that part. But how?" Lura swallowed. "They were made to follow orders. Their minds are not their own. I changed their orders." Jack's stomach twisted. "That wasn't how I worked. That wasn't how anything worked." "You hacked them?" he asked, trying to make sense of it. Lura shook her head. "No, I didn't hack them. I spoke to them. And they listened." Jack ran a hand through his hair. "You spoke to them? Like, in your head?" Lura nodded. Jack looked at Reese. Reese just muttered, "Oh, hell no." Jack turned back to the cockpit and froze. The warship was moving again. It had been waiting, watching, and now it was advancing. "Brace yourselves," Jack shouted. The Starhawk's sensors blared. The warship was launching something big. Jack's heart stopped when he saw it. It wasn't a laser. It wasn't a missile. It was a tractor beam. A massive blue field of energy shot toward them. If it hit the Starhawk, they would be completely trapped. No running. No escape. Jack yanked the controls, sending the ship into a sharp dive. The tractor beam barely missed them, flashing past their hull. "They're trying to pull us in," Reese shouted. Jack gritted his teeth. "Not if I can help it." He pushed the engines to max, shooting the Starhawk away at full speed. The ship roared forward, but the warship was faster. Jack cursed. They needed a plan. Lura suddenly grabbed the console. "There's a place we can go," she said quickly. "A place they won't follow." Jack narrowed his eyes. "Where?" Lura hesitated. "A planet. It's hidden. but we need to get there fast." Jack didn't have time to argue. He punched in the coordinates she sent. "Reese, set up a warp jump," Jack ordered. Reese's fingers flew over the controls. Coordinates locked. "But Jack, this is risky. That planet is in an unmapped sector." Jack nodded. "I know, but staying here is certain death." Reese sighed. "Then let's pray this works." The Starhawk's engines flared, and the ship shot forward into warp speed, vanishing just as the enemy fired again. For a few moments, everything was silent. Then the Starhawk emerged in an unfamiliar star system. Jack exhaled in relief until he saw what was ahead. A massive green planet loomed before them. Thick storms swirled over its surface, and jagged mountains pierced through the clouds. The place looked ancient, untouched, and dangerous. Jack turned to Lura. "Where the hell have you brought us?" Lura didn't answer. She just stared at the planet, her hands clenched. Vexa whispered, "It's the only place we'll be safe." Jack didn't like the sound of that. Then the ship's sensors blared again. Something was already waiting for them on the surface. Jack's pulse spiked. They weren't alone. Unleashing the power, the Starhawk trembled as it broke through the planet's thick atmosphere. Jagged lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating towering mountains and vast, shadowy forests below. The green-tinted clouds churned violently, wrapping the surface in a thick storm. Jack gripped the controls, fighting against the turbulence. "This planet is trying to kill us before we even land." Reese cursed, pressing buttons rapidly on her console. "Sensors are useless in this mess. I can't tell what's down there." Lura stood behind them, her dark eyes locked onto the swirling storms outside. "We have to land near the ruins." Jack shot her a sharp look. "Ruins?" Lura nodded. "An old temple. It's where we'll find the artifact." Jack had had enough of cryptic answers. "Artifact? What artifact? What's waiting for us down there?" Lura hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "The thing that can restore our power." Jack's hands tightened on the controls. Power. So far, Lura had shown a terrifying ability. She could control machines with her mind. And now she was talking about restoring something even greater. Jack wanted answers, but there was no time. The ship's warning alarms blared. Something was coming. Jack glanced at the radar, and his blood ran cold. Multiple fast-moving objects were approaching from below, climbing straight toward them. "They followed us," Reese shouted. "No," Lura said quietly. "Not them. Something else." Jack didn't like that answer one damn bit. "Hold on." He yanked the controls, sending the Starhawk into a steep dive. The ship roared through the storm, dodging lightning strikes and debris, heading straight for a clearing in the jungle below. Then, a screech. A massive black shape shot past the cockpit, moving faster than any living thing had the right to. Jack barely had time to register it before another one followed, then another, and another. They weren't ships. They weren't drones. They were creatures. The beasts of Rothus 6. The ship's external cameras flickered, trying to focus. The moment the images came through, Jack felt a chill crawl up his spine. The creatures were huge, serpentine, but with massive razor-sharp wings that sliced through the air like blades. Their black, armored scales shimmered as they twisted through the sky, eyes glowing a cold silver. "Those things look like they could chew through a warship," Reese muttered. Lura's voice was calm. "They're guardians." Jack risked a glance at her. Guardians of what? Lura's hands tightened at her sides. "Of the artifact." Jack cursed. "Great. Anything else you forgot to mention?" Before Lura could answer, one of the beasts let out a deafening screech and lunged at the ship. Jack barely dodged in time. The creature's wings sliced through the air, missing the hull by mere inches. "They're trying to force us down," Reese shouted. Jack gritted his teeth. "Then let's give them what they want." He cut the engines, letting the Starhawk drop like a stone. The creatures hesitated for a split second, just enough time for Jack to reignite the thrusters and steer the ship toward a small stone plateau in the middle of the jungle. The landing gear slammed down, skidding hard before coming to a violent stop. For a moment, everything was silent. Jack exhaled. "We're alive." "Barely." Reese tapped a control panel. "The creatures. They're circling us." Jack looked through the viewport. The massive winged beasts hovered above the jungle, their glowing silver eyes locked onto the ship, as if they were waiting for something. Jack turned to Lura. "What now?" Lura didn't answer. She simply opened the hatch and stepped outside. Jack cursed and grabbed his blaster. Why do these kids keep walking into danger? He ran after her. The temple awakens. The air outside was thick and humid. The stone plateau was surrounded by giant trees with black, twisting roots that pulsed with faint energy. But Jack wasn't focused on the jungle. His eyes were locked onto the ancient structure before them. A temple, buried under vines and cracked stone, stood half-hidden in the mist. Strange glyphs were carved into its surface, glowing faintly as if they had been asleep for centuries. Jack muttered, "I've got a bad feeling about this." Lura walked toward the temple, her bare feet stepping onto the glowing symbols without hesitation. The moment she touched the stone, the entire temple rumbled. The symbols flared with light. A deep hum filled the air. The creatures above let out a piercing screech, not of rage, but of recognition. Vexa, still holding Jack's hand, whispered, "It's waking up." Jack's heart pounded. Waking up. Before he could react, the ground split open. A staircase, long and endless, descended into darkness. Jack raised his blaster. "You better tell me what's down there, Lura." Lura turned to him. For the first time, she looked different. Her fear was gone. In its place was something else. Something ancient. She whispered, "The thing that will change everything." Then she stepped into the darkness. Jack swore, "Damn it. I hate this job." And he followed her down. Above, the creatures circled the temple, waiting. Because they knew something was coming. The final stand. The air inside the temple was heavy, not just with age, but with something else. Something alive. Jack's boots echoed as he descended the stone staircase. Strange glyphs lined the walls, pulsing faintly with blue-green light. It felt like the entire place was watching them. Behind him, Reese followed with her blaster raised, her jaw tight with tension. Vexa clung to Jack's sleeve, her small fingers trembling. Lura walked ahead, her bare feet barely making a sound against the ancient stone. Jack cleared his throat. "Okay, someone better start talking. What exactly are we walking into?" Lura didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. Too calm. "This temple was built for us," she said, "for what we were supposed to be." Jack exchanged a glance with Reese. "And what exactly were you supposed to be?" Lura stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Before them stretched a massive chamber, its ceiling so high it disappeared into the shadows. At its center stood an altar, glowing with shifting, liquid light. Jack took a cautious step forward. The moment his boot touched the chamber floor, the walls rumbled. Ancient mechanisms activated. The temple came to life. The truth revealed. From the glowing altar, a holographic figure emerged, tall, robed, and alien. Its elongated head and deep-set eyes made Jack's stomach churn. It wasn't just any alien. It was one of them. One of the beings who had created Lura and Vexa. The figure's voice was smooth and emotionless, speaking in a language that Jack's translator struggled to keep up with. Designation: Lura 7 and Vexa 3. You have returned. Initiating final phase. Jack's gut tightened. Final phase. The hologram continued. The ascension process requires synchronization. Subjects must proceed to the core for completion. Lura stepped forward. We don't have time. The enemy is coming. Jack grabbed her arm. Whoa, what the hell is he talking about? What's ascension? Lura turned to him, her dark eyes flashing with something Jack couldn't name. The power that was taken from us. The thing that made us what we are. Jack let out a slow breath. Which is? Lura hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, weapons. Jack's stomach sank. He had suspected it, but hearing her say it made it real. Before he could react, the temple shook violently. A deafening explosion ripped through the entrance. Jack spun, grabbing his blaster. Reese cursed under her breath. They weren't alone anymore. The enemy arrives. Through the swirling dust and debris, dark shapes emerge, armored figures, weapons glowing with deadly blue energy. The cybernetic hunters were back. But this time, they weren't alone. Behind them, stepping through the destroyed temple entrance, was the enemy captain. The same voice that had haunted their comms now spoke in person. You should have surrendered. Jack gritted his teeth, raising his weapon. Sorry, I have authority issues. The captain's helmeted faceplate remained emotionless. This does not concern you, human. He turned his red glowing eyes toward Lura and Vexa. Come. You were never meant to escape. Lura stepped in front of Vexa, her body tense. We're not going with you. The captain's gloved hand rose, fingers curling slightly. That is not your decision. A sickening pressure filled the air. Jack felt an invisible force wrap around him, pulling, squeezing. He fought against it, but his limbs felt like they were trapped in iron chains. He wasn't the only one. Reese gasped beside him, her body locking up. Even Vexa whimpered as she lifted off the ground, her small hands grasping at nothing. The enemy captain's voice remained calm. You cannot resist. Jack clenched his teeth. This bastard had some kind of gravity-based ability. But then, the air cracked with energy, and the pressure was gone. Jack collapsed to the floor, gasping. His limbs felt like they were burning from the sudden release. He looked up and saw Lura standing untouched. The captain's power had no effect on her. Lura's voice was strong. You don't control us anymore. The captain tilted his head. Your abilities are incomplete. Lura took a deep breath. Not for long. Then she turned toward the altar and stepped into the light. Ascension. The temple reacted instantly. The glowing liquid light rose, wrapping around Lura's body. Symbols on her skin ignited, flaring with raw, pulsing energy. The air around her vibrated, sending waves of pressure outward. Jack's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't just powerful. She was becoming something else. The enemy captain's red eyes flashed. He lunged forward, but it was already too late. A shockwave of golden energy exploded outward from Lura, hurling the cybernetic hunters across the chamber. The captain himself staggered, his armored boots scraping against the stone floor. Lura opened her eyes, and for the first time, Jack saw the truth. She wasn't just a lost alien child. She wasn't just someone who could talk to machines. She was something far older, far deadlier, and she wasn't afraid anymore. The captain took a step back. For the first time, Jack thought he saw something close to fear in the man's stance. You don't understand what you're awakening, the captain said. That power was never meant to be released. Lura tilted her head. Then maybe you should run. The entire temple shook. The guardian creatures outside let out a thunderous roar, their silver eyes flaring as they descended toward the temple entrance. Jack grabbed Vexa, pulling her away from the chaos. Reese yanked Jack's arm. We need to get out of here. Now. But Jack couldn't move, because Lura was no longer the same girl he had rescued. She was something else now. Something unbelievable. And the enemy was about to find out exactly what that meant. The unbelievable transformation. The air inside the temple crackled with raw energy. The glowing light from the ancient altar wrapped around Lura, swirling like a living storm. Her eyes blazed with a golden hue. Her body lifted slightly off the ground as the temple's power flowed into her. Jack had seen a lot of things in his time. black hole disasters, alien wars, ships torn apart by gravity storms. But he had never seen anything like this. The enemy captain stood frozen, his red glowing eyes locked onto Lyra. The cybernetic hunters that had been flung across the chamber struggled to rise, their metal limbs twitching from the impact. Jack swallowed hard. Something was happening to her, something that shouldn't be possible. Lyra turned her head, her gaze calm but inhuman. She was still herself, but also something more. The temple trembled, the stone walls cracking as ancient powers surged through the air. Outside, the winged guardian creatures roared, circling above the ruins like they had been waiting for this exact moment. Jack took a slow step back. What the hell had they awakened? The captain's last stand. The enemy captain recovered quickly, his stance shifting into a battle position. His voice was colder than before. This must not be allowed. Jack's gut tightened. He had no idea what Lyra was now capable of, but he knew one thing. The captain wasn't running. Which meant he thought he could still win. The cybernetic hunters, now back on their feet, charged forward. Jack yanked his blaster, but before he could fire, Lyra raised a single hand. A pulse of pure energy exploded from her fingertips. The cybernetic hunters froze mid-stride, their bodies locking up like they had been turned into statues. Sparks burst from their joints as their mechanical limbs seized up, unable to move. Their red eyes flickered and died. Jack's heart pounded. She hadn't just stopped them. She had shut them down. Lyra turned her gaze to the enemy captain. Your machines can't help you anymore. The captain lunged. He moved fast, inhumanly fast, his black armor shifting as he activated some kind of enhanced combat mode. His entire form blurred, and in less than a second, he was right in front of Lyra, swinging a blade of pure energy at her. Jack's instincts screamed. Too fast. But Lyra didn't move. She raised a single finger, and the captain's blade stopped in midair, inches from her face. Jack's breath caught. That wasn't possible. The captain tried to push forward, his enhanced strength straining against whatever invisible force Lyra had just unleashed. His armor groaned under the pressure. Then, his blade shattered. The energy weapon disintegrated like glass breaking in slow motion. Lyra's voice was quiet. You were never meant to control us. The captain's body locked up, the same way the cybernetic hunters had. His glowing red eyes flickered as his systems failed, his limbs trembling. Jack realized something terrifying. Lyra wasn't just controlling the machines anymore. She was controlling everything. The captain's voice came out distorted, his systems failing. You don't understand what you have done. Lyra stepped closer, tilting her head. I understand perfectly. Then, with one last pulse of energy, she ripped him apart. Not in a violent explosion. Not in a burst of blood and metal. He simply disappeared. Gone. Deleted. Jack's stomach twisted. What the hell had she become? The aftermath. The temple fell silent. The air, once thick with tension, felt light, as if something dark had been lifted from the world. Lyra lowered her hands. The golden energy surrounding her faded, and for the first time, she looked normal again. Jack slowly approached, his voice low. What the hell was that? Lyra blinked. The glowing in her eyes dimmed, and for the first time, she looked tired. She looked at Jack, and in the quietest voice, she said, I don't know. Jack clenched his fists. He wanted to yell. He wanted to demand answers. But the truth was, he already knew. Lyra and Vexa were never just two lost girls. They were something more, something that had been hidden, something that had been created. And now, they had awakened. The decision. Reese finally found her voice. So, what now? Jack looked at the temple, at the wreckage of the cybernetic hunters, at the empty space where the enemy captain had once stood. Then he looked at the two sisters. Vexa, still small and scared. Lyra, stronger than ever, but with an expression that told Jack even she didn't fully understand what she had become. Jack took a deep breath. He had a choice. He could leave them here. Let them go wherever this power took them. Let them figure out their own fate. Or he could bring them with him, not as cargo, not as fugitives, but as family. Jack exhaled. "Come on," he said finally. "Let's get off this rock." Laura's eyes widened slightly. "You're taking us with you?" Jack gave her a tired smirk. "Well, I sure as hell don't want to be on your bad side." For the first time, Laura smiled. A real, genuine smile. Jack turned and headed back toward the ship. Besides, something tells me the universe just got a whole lot more interesting. As they stepped back onto the Starhawk, the guardian creatures outside let out a final piercing cry, not of attack, but of farewell, because they knew the universe had just changed forever, and the legend of the two sisters had only just begun.